To begin with, the revolution is on, and it is not an event. It is a marathon. So maybe people must not despair. We are still on. We're marching on. Can we send Ruto home today or in the next few weeks? That remains to be seen, but it depends on how the result we have as a people. How much are we keen on doing that? And that means, as Professor Cheng has just stated, it is not about Ruto as a person, but the whole system. It will be a system overhaul. Assuming Ruto stays till 2027, what is the game plan? Maybe this is also a conversation that we need to have so that there's that bit of reality as well that he might decide to stay. And if he stays, Professor Ocheng, maybe, yeah, thank you. If he stays, then what are some of the few things we'd like to achieve to ensure that the revolution is complete at the ballot? So these are some of the questions we'll be pushing to our speakers today, the General, Miguna Miguna, Mcoure, Professor Migai, who is a professor in law and constitutional matters, may also maybe chime in, and many other speakers here, so that we see how we can move forward with both the options, so that just in case one bullet fails, maybe the other one stands. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Godfather. Thank you so much, those who have talked. I want to say this, that we are setting rules, no personal attacks on this basis, and that one should be clear to everyone. I was waiting many people to join to say this because we don't gonna repeat it. And also, let us be focused. When the co say that it is 2 minutes, we believe it and we mean it. That's 2 minutes for us, for all of us to talk, because we are more than now 2,000 people, and many requests as much as so we want to everybody to at least have a voice on the same, but that can be done if we are to the point, and if you have a question, just direct it, and if also you can write it down there, is very important. We're going to read them, and our speaker and everybody will come in to answer those questions. Daktari, how are you doing today? Good evening. Good how are you? How was your night? How was your day?
Good evening, Hillary. Good evening, everybody. I'm all right.
All right, welcome to Spaces again, and we're happy to see you, Daktari. Let me welcome Kasmuel Mcoure. How are you doing? Good evening.
Good evening, Hillary. How are you?
Good. Happy to
Same
see
here.
you, man. Welcome to Spaces, and we're happy to have you today.
Asante, good
Yes.
to be here.
All right, Biril, I saw your hands, and then we welcome Daktari to give his opening remarks, and then Kasmuel Mcoure. Go ahead, Biril.
Good evening, Daktari. Good evening, Marge. Good evening, Kingston. Mine was just very short. I was actually responding to what Migai said. If you see somebody back on the top of the roofs and buying the crowd, that is somebody that is suffering from child. Let me not mention that word, but that is somebody that is looking for attention from the wrong seekers. So let's forge ahead. Let's carry on with the discussion. Let's make it productive, and let's forge ahead. Viva people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerotich. I see you down there. If you can have a mic and also come in, we'll appreciate. Daktari, Dr. Miguna Miguna, I see you, and the professor asked a certain question. I think you heard him very well. Can you come in and also give your opening remark as we welcome people on the platform?
Thanks, Hillary. Once more, I welcome everyone to the spaces. I see also Professor Kivutha Kibwana. If he would like to speak, we would be more than welcoming him to come and speak. I welcome Kasmuel Mcoure and all the Gen Zs on the platform. It is Kasmuel and his colleagues and the heroes that died that have inspired not just Kenya, but the entire African continent and the entire world with their bravery, with their clarity and eloquence. It's very, very important, as I always say, the youth are the motors of change. And we have seen it in real time in Kenya for the last 1 month. It's quite inspiring. I wanted to say a few things preliminarily. I believe Professor Chien has not been attending our spaces weekly. This point has been made repeatedly that when we say Ruto must go, we don't mean Ruto the person. It is a clarion call that symbolizes a demand by the people for the overhaul of the system, including the removal of Ruto the person, the head of the regime of Kenya Kwanza, and the entire political oligarchy in Kenya. So Ruto must go is not a clarion call directed at the individual, but it symbolizes what the people of Kenya are opposed to: the system of corruption, plunder, the system of nepotism and tribalism, the system of banditry, the system of abductions and mass murders of innocent Kenyans, the system that abrogates everyone's right and subverts the constitution, the system of lawlessness and land grabbing from the time of the flag independence in 1963 up to now. They are institutionalizing this system. That is why, actually, they have already institutionalized it. That's why when Ruto was put to a corner, it did not take long for Raila Odinga and his cohorts to come out of nowhere to start propping him up. And now they think they are fortifying well enough for him to go on rooftops and start lecturing people. I can see the arrogance that was there before June 25th has actually returned, with David Ndii and the rest going back to insulting Kenyans and the Gen Zs. They call them Gen Goons and other things. I would want us to reaffirm our commitment to this movement and to the revolutionary transformation agenda that the Gen Zs represent and have articulated. And we cannot do that if we don't organize and mobilize. Yes, this revolution has been and continue to be leaderless, tribeless, and organic. But it has to crystallize in terms of mobilization of all sectors of the Kenyan society, because no revolution can leave any generation, any gender, any class, or any region behind. We have to carry as many people as possible. So last week I talked of the broad-based movement where we are going to, and we must include all these factions and all these permutations of the movement so that we can win. We don't want to wait for 2027. It would be a tragedy if we allow this cabal to continue to be in power up to 2027. Kenya will be no more, because as it is, they have already bankrupted it. So I think if people wait until 2027, Kenya will be waiting for burial. So the ballot is not a revolutionary pathway in a neocolonial state. Kenya is a neocolonial state controlled not just by the cabal who are who live in Kenya and operate in Kenya, but by the Western imperialist interests. So election is just a choreographed coronation of the cabals. We recycle them, one faction after another, but the system never changes. What they do don't change. Our interests and our rights don't change. And therefore, it would be an exercise in futility to wait until 2027. So I have seen people are talking about nane nane, but last week I said the best way to remove this system and to defeat Ruto and his collaborators is to have a daily protest. It's not materialized, but it is what I am still calling for. Having these breaks and letting the security forces to go and rearm and reheal and recoup and reorganize is counterproductive. So I will be keen to listen to what people are saying in terms of the real concrete tactical um, input towards this realization. What is it that we need to do other than just saying it? How do we get people to stay on the street day after day until the regime collapses? What do we need to do logistically? How much, in terms of resource mobilization, do we need for water, for flags, for tents, for medical camps, for whatever it is that we need for daily protests to materialize? The students in Bangladesh have done a great job, but they're just students. In fact, the Bangladeshi protests have not been the entire population or generation like in Kenya. It's just university students. And look at what they have done, even amidst a lot of brutality. So in Kenya, we are lucky that we have a more broad based mass of people who are disgusted by what we've had and have come out on the street. In Bangladesh, they're not even demonstrating because of corruption. They are demonstrating because of the reservation of 50% of jobs for veterans, minorities, and people with disabilities. In Kenya, the problem is worse. So people need to be more angry and to be able to come up with strategies and tactics of removing this regime faster than some of us are seeing. Thank you very much, Hilary. That's all I wanted to say initially.
Thank you so much for that call for, and you answered the Professor Cheng. I think you have had that, and the clear information is out there. Kasmuel Mcoure, good evening again, bro. How are you doing? And chime in, bro.
Good evening, Hillary. Thank you, Dr. for that, and for every Kenyan who's listening. I am at a point where it feels very difficult to be a Kenyan. And I say this because it feels as though the activities of the past month have been futile. The political class is trying to make it seem as though we were just but wasting time and we were just but playing. And I've heard the president somewhere say that when in one of his promissory campaigns, as he's wont to do, that he had reserved some money for some development projects. And when the finance bill was kicked out, then he had to re-strategize. And you hear the language, as disparaging as it is. He talks of our activities the way he used to talk about the members of the previous opposition when he was campaigning. It is disparaging because being on the streets as a young person, I did not look forward to seeing anybody die. In my head, when we started on Tuesday, we just wanted to sort out that punitive finance bill. But then the goings on of the past month have been nothing but eye opening, that have revealed the rot that we have in this country. So a lot of the times when we come on the spaces, I feel like we tend to sit and talk about our hopes, our ambitions, and our aspirations. We we risk going the direction that the establishment wants us to go, which is jumping on asking ourselves the what next. We're we're midwifing a very important process in our democracy, where the Gen Z movement is a vehicle for such an important social change that we we ought to now, and I will seek the indulgence of every Kenyan around to figure out ways in which we will survive the now. Because as much as you've heard this countless times, I need to remind us that there are people who have died. They've not died, they've been killed by the police. At least 60 people. At least 60 are still missing officially, and hundreds have been maimed and injured and wounded. It's I think what I would love us to think about, what I would love us to steer this conversation towards is what are sustainable ways for us to effect these kinds of changes? What are sustainable ways for us to ensure that when we say Ruto must go, when people are paid on the roadside, it does not demoralize us? Because you'll realize that the state has all the weapons, it has all the money, it has most of the influence, but we're at this uh, tipping point where the people have reclaimed their sovereign powers and we're exercising it. And we are seeing through the balderdash that the political class is clamoring to instill in our brains, and the fear that they're trying to instill in us, the brutalization, the criminalization of our rights, the criminalization of us being able to have a flag and us being able to have a voice. And I was talking to someone from the media the other day in an interview, and I told them that the reason why they even managed to advance to parliament and even talk to the police without being tear gassed or beaten is because the government, one, despises them, but two, knows that they own them and they can gag and buy them at whatever time they want. But as young people, even if you are a group of 10 and you gave a whole month's notice, you still will be met with heavy force. So I think if you're a young person and you're a part of this movement, I think what we need to be doing is asking ourselves, how can we sustain this in a way that it does not seem as though we are pursuing selfish interests to fellow Kenyans, not to external powers, not to the powers that be, but to fellow Kenyans. How can we continue with the civic education? How can we help the people in our communities and societies to understand that this is exactly what we're clamoring for? Because the government is hell bent on misinforming. You've seen what the bots and the bloggers are consistently doing, trying to paint this movement, trying to tarnish its name and infantilize it. I think it's very important for us going forward to see how can we sustain the momentum in terms of education, in terms of us mobilizing in communities, in terms of dealing with the infightings that we are seeing, in terms of just rising above sweating the small stuff. Because if I believe that this change will be made, we're at the point where we will midwife this change. And for me, it is very clear, it's as clear as day that we can change the system, we can change the status quo as it stands only if we believe. And I'm just imploring you that don't fear, don't be afraid when we talk about the Nane Nane March. What are some of the ways in which we can ensure that it is a success? What are some of the ways in which we can track our progress in the mobilization in the week that's leading to Nane Nane? What does that symbolize? What does that stand for? What are some of the things we can consider to do to ensure that we do not lose more lives? What are strategic places we can congregate and gather? How can we also ensure that we have leverage over this oppressive regime that we have? I think I will stop there for my opening remarks, and then I will chime in a little later as the conversation advances. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel, and thank you so much for that. And we appreciate the work that you're doing and all the Gen Zs that on board and what they're doing. Tony Gashoka, I see you on board. How are you doing? Good evening.
Good evening, my brother Hillary.
Yes. All right. What is your take? Welcome to the space.
Well, the first thing I want to tell Kenyans is that, war is a series of battles. And if you are in a war, you must understand that you will win some battles, you will lose some battles. Some of them will be neutral, some of them will be devastating, some of them will have to be repeated. If you look at the history of war, particularly the Second World War, uh, people will argue which were the most important battles. And high among them was the battle for, of the skies, the engagement of the German Air Force with the British RAF. Winston Churchill was to say later that never in the history of mankind has so much been owed by so many to so few, because of the gallantry and the bravery of the English pilots that were able to down the German planes. And Hitler, from that moment on, made a decision that he could not conquer England from the sky. And that began to affect his strategies, including opening the second front to attack Russia and Moscow. But also, Hillary, we are reaching a point of reckoning where everybody is actually being held to task, including the Gen Z movement. Over ambition, there's a Chinese saying that talks about ambition, that ambition without knowledge is like a ship on land. And sometimes, if you are over ambitious in your strategies, you lose the war because you lose battles that you should have won. And right now, sometimes in this revolution, there is a lot of infighting as well as there is advancements. Who owns these victories? Who owns the title? Is it a Gen Z revolution, or is it a Kenyan revolution? Is it being led by this group or that group, or is it an anti-Ruto coalition that is fighting for change? Machiavelli in his book, The Prince, talked about that to win, a prince must have half skill and half fortune. We must remember that underlying this head-to-head with William Ruto's despotic regime is the issue of the economy, that this economy is actually in ICU, that the tax regimes that he was proposing are because 7 out of 10 shillings goes to the payment of debt, and the other 3 will not be able to sustain the economy, and that continues to become the burden that is put on Kenyans. So as you execute this war, some fundamentals will not change. William Ruto has been dealt his card by fate. He's got an economy that he cannot run away from. Reappointing the cabinet and going around the country holding roadside meetings will not change the economy or the fundamentals that put people to the street. This is the case because the highest and the biggest motivation for us, the cost of living, which is tied up to this energy. We must remember that the economy is hurting Kenyans every day. So the motivation is not so much the bullets that try to fill our children. What is the motivation is that people cannot live under these circumstances in Kenya for another 3 years. And therefore, the urgency of the moment is because we must change things. And to change things, we are changing not just dictator William Ruto, but the way in which the entire regime, and in fact, the way in which the ruling class has governed us. Why do we need 47 counties when we could have 8 counties? In fact, Nairobi should be run by the central government, like Washington, D.C., and the other could be reduced to 7 counties for costs. Why do we have a woman leader when we don't need that, and the cost of running government, parliament, MCAs, etc.? So if we remember and calibrate that the problem that we have underscoring all our problems is the cost of living, and therefore an unbearable burden on Mwananchi, then we refocus, and that becomes then a war, yes, dominated by Gen Z, of course, by their numbers, but also dominated by all other Kenyans who are living under those strenuous circumstances. And therefore, what is the way forward? Revolutions that are fought against the economy are many, from Mahatma Gandhi to the French Revolution and the American, in the Declaration of Independence against King Edward of England, when they said that no more taxes can go to England without representation. And therefore, if you look at where Kenya has reached now, it has reached a point where the ruling class have decided to consolidate with the dictator. But I want to remind this country that Africa has had worse dictators. I remember Dr. Idi Amin Field Marshal. I mean, that man was as brutal. It makes Zakayo look like a priest. I mean, he was hounded out of Uganda. He was a military general of self-description. He used to call himself a field marshal. He used to kill and maim Ugandans, at will. But they were able to overcome him. Samuel Doe, Kamusu Banda, Emperor Bokassa, Here in Sudan, you had the changes that came that people could not even believe a military general could be deposed in Sudan, which was, a functioning military state dictatorship. So there is no doubt that we can triumph against Zakayo using the economy as the backbone of this revolution and this struggle. But where we must go is to be able to allow these younger guys who are very vocal to also understand there is wisdom in age and experience. That some of us from the 90s have been through this kind of process when the Forum of Restoration of Democracy was founded by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Kenneth Matiba, and at that time, the former Mayor Rubia and others who were able to come together, Wamalwa Kijana and various other people from all over the country, Baramarawis from the coast. And those struggles in the 90s can be mirrored to the struggles today. Those guys were then the young Turks. And the issue was that at that point, we were looking for democratic and multi-party government. Now we are looking for economic emancipation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Tony, and we really appreciate your ideas, and also the match as you have the history, and also the issues, what we can do and the way forward. And thank you so much for coming to the space as always. And also, I
Hillary, I don't think if Tony had landed, you just interrupted him as he was speaking.
Tony,
Yes, I was just going to conclude, but then you came onto the space.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Conclude, bro. Conclude. Yes.
I wanted to lend my weight and my prayers to this idea of Nane Nane, because Nane Nane may, actually go down in history the same way the March of Washington, led then by Martin Luther King, came into history. It can become the amalgamation, the glue that sticks us together, the kind of light that we need to be able to give life to this month of experience we've had against Zakayo. So I wanted to say that the idea and the founding fathers of this idea of Nane Nane are no different. In fact, it is better well thought than when we did Sabasaba. I want to add my voice to support it. And I cry on call that if we can now start working toward a target, having a day, because it's very hard to organize weeks of protest and everyday protest, but we can actually put our forces together, have one thing, because when the March of Washington was done on that day in 1963, a million people marched onto Washington. And at that point, the American trajectory of the civil rights movement was changed forever. So I want to appeal this day on this forum at this space that let's also have a target. Let's have D-Day. Let's have a day when we can say we are meeting with Zakayo and we are meeting with him with all our force and all our strength. And there is time to organize, and there's a time to raise the funds and the organization for medical camp, for whatever is necessary. How can we put that together so as Kenya we can come and make Nane Nane an Independence Day in Kenya's history? That's all I want to say for now.
Thank you so much. I want to give this mic to my co-host. I see, Maj, you carry up your hands, Kingsman, and everything. Everybody, welcome to the space, and let us continue to follow the rules. And also, when you open a mic, you have background noise. Make sure that you are in a quiet place so that we can keep our conversation clear as much as we can. Maj, I've seen your hand. Yeah, you can come in.
Thanks, Hillary. Welcome everyone to the space. Listen, now I'm more settled to speak. I want to take it from there. I had the position of Dr. Miguna. I'm hearing the position of Tony and also of Kasmuel. And Benji, as you come in, what are the concrete means of really achieving results? Because that is what the previous speakers are talking about, but in different tones. So can you share with us, really the concrete, steps that we would need to take to make sure that the results are achieved? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Maj. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Hillary, the host, Dr. Miguna. I'll be very brief. I wanted to come in at this juncture before we go too far, simply because I am very proud of what has happened in the last 5-6 weeks. And why am I proud of this? For those of you who've been around civil society for a while, people like Professor Kivuda Kibwana at the Center for Law and Research International, where I worked for a bit under Maurice Odhiambo of the National Civil Society Congress, we had something in 2010 called Vugu Vugu Mashinani. And I'm very much able to talk to a lot of folks, including relatives that serve in government. And one of the things that I've heard, the themes I've had in the last 3 weeks is what the president had asked is anywhere in Nairobi where you see 100 people, 100 people, can the intelligence try to find out where is the transport for these people coming from and where is the lunch allowance? Because this is also how NGOs operate. Remember, we're living in a society, Marge and others, where we have very serious manufactured poverty. Kenyans live on this thing they call less than $1 a day. It sounds like a statistic, but it's very real because hunger is real. Food is so expensive. There are no jobs. Under Moi, we destroyed all the industries. And that is the result now in the economy where people are literally that desperate. So when they're not really finding this was very disturbing. And this is also very encouraging in the sense that having attended the protests, I can testify that a lot of the people that came, young ladies, campus people, people looking for work, even people in private sector that were able to get offs. Because it was so genuine, I remember being on Standard Street near Trattoria, and the restaurants were just throwing water to us to battle tear gas. Um, Remember the first days Java feeding people, etc. And so this has been a very big shock to the government. In a country where people think more selfishly, where people, it's very difficult to mobilize even 100 people. Why am I giving this background? I'm giving this background because, by the way, Tony Gashoka was referencing the Battle of Normandy. This was, I think the casualties there were something like 700,000. That's what Winston Churchill was talking about, just the grit and the valor, that came with this war. What I'm suggesting here is has been said before, but I wanted to be more specific. And shout out to Kasmuel who talked about Nane Nane. The Million Man March that Tony Gashoka has just spoken about was prior to Kenya's independence, the Million Man March by Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. We must get serious. Why we must get serious is because you can see Ruto has a problem. It almost appears like a mental problem because I cannot believe that the president, and I have sent my petition to parliament yesterday to oppose the new cabinet. I cannot believe that you can dismiss a cabinet as a constitutional president and then return the same. If you look at Article 132, if you look at Article 75, Article 73, to dismiss a cabinet, first of all, a cabinet is not a hangout for homeboys and side chicks and whatnot. This is just a fact if you read the constitution, if you believe in the constitution. And so for someone like this that has now reverted to raiding the opposition, riding around on rooftops. The only thing these guys will understand, and this is the challenge now to us, which is a very achievable challenge, is for Nane Nane, let us, as we build towards Million Man March, let us target to get 800,000 people on the street. It is doable. Let us, like for me, I'm going to get anybody and everybody that I know to join the demonstrations. They have to understand why we must do this. They have to understand that this country must be saved. And as I finish, I'll demonstrate why this country must be saved. 800,000 is the safety is in numbers. You cannot kill everybody. In fact, I dare say, and I'm sure they're listening, that day for State House, a lot of calls were made and a lot of people were called. And I was called. I was called. And what their argument was that if you march to State House and the regime falls, then the next president will face the same and the one after that. And we have a challenge of losing the republic and losing our constitutional democracy. And I can hear that. And of course, if you're a patriot, you have a concern for the well-being of your country. But look at where the country is now. Look at where the country is now. So if we can mobilize 800,000, because what these guys have done is they've regrouped quickly, they're mobilizing goons, they're abusing Gen Z and us again. The president, as we speak now, is in a town hall in Mombasa telling lies. There's only one language a bully understands. And so Kasmuel and the rest, if we get 800,000 people in the street, we don't have that. They will have to mobilize the Air Force and bomb us and let them do that. Having said that, let me just highlight one thing and then I can close. The US government has written to State House on Friday. The letter is all over the place. It was in the form of a phone call, which then, of course, has to be typed out because it's the phone call is listened to by the CIA, etc., etc. It's very annoying that from the very start of these demonstrations, I personally tweeted Meg Whitman, and I've been talking to a lot of these guys before when we did governance work in the embassy, asking them to ask Ruto to stop shooting unarmed citizens. So now they've put it in writing. uh, just to quote that, the president must hear the voice of civil society, must respect the contribution of patriots. But it just saddens me so much that we call out something on January 23rd, 24th, June 23rd, 24th, and it's until July 27th that you're putting it into writing when they've shot people in the head, when they're kidnapping citizens in broad daylight. And so countries that believe in democracy, that stand for human rights, must stand to be counted. This war is going to go even to the United Nations. This war is going to go ultimately even to the US Embassy because we are not playing. Kenyans are asking for their country back, and that is a very noble ask. Finally, I see people on here, I don't want to name them, that know a lot of the things that are going on. I'm made to understand that there's a very big scandal unfolding via the e-citizen where the boss centralized all collections of all monies, formed a company, and the brief was, this is the money that we're going to collect via about 10,000 services in government, and then we garner the money. The concern for me is, of every 10 shillings collected, 7 goes to debt, and then 3 to development. And we know that there's a lot of theft going on. So my question is where is the money? This money being stolen, because I saw a British Prime Minister saying, and I quote, that if the United Kingdom had been subjected to the level of looting that a country like Kenya has been subjected to, the country of the United Kingdom would cease to exist. I think we have a much bigger skunk here, and that might explain the very serious desperation on the part of government. So let us be focused. Let us not do small demonstrations. I don't believe in those small numbers things. Let's do 800K. Let these people put their weapons down and say, okay, now it is like for like, tumewasikia. Now we must go by how you guys are saying under Article 1.1. That is, if we don't feel we're hitting that target, let us not then go to the street. That's unpopular to say, but this thing of a flurry of guys here, 37 guys here, 140 guys on this side, etc., let us consolidate 800,000 people in Nairobi. Let us march to KICC and fill it, and Uhuru Park, and we stay there. God bless Kenya. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much, Benji, and thanks everyone who's listening. As we proceed, I would like to bring on board ladies also to speak. We will restrict to 2 minutes per person who are going to, share about how you think we can make the plans concrete. And if you have questions to the main speaker, Daktari Miguna and Kasmuel, please do that. The reason why we are restricting to 2 minutes each is because we've had several times where speakers are not able to speak and they keep inboxing and saying we were not able to speak. So for the sake of fairness, if you're still waiting and you've been able to speak on the panel the past 2 to 3 times, kindly allow those who haven't yet had a chance to also have a chance to speak. Chica Freak, over to you.
Is she speaking much? I can't hear.
She's opened her mic, but I cannot hear her. Chica Freak, are you able to hear us? Okay. Okay, as we wait for her to settle, Dr. Majus, kindly proceed 2 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, our speaker today, Miguna. And Mcoure. I have some little to put across. Things have been said here. I heard Dr. Miguna talked about how we are going to do an overhaul, including the old politicians, if I put it in a simple terms. So I will ask him on that. By the time he will be responding, to tell us, are we here to build more enemies because we are in a war, guys, that people are planning for us. People are regrouping and want to make sure that we go nowhere. That's why you see a big coalition now. Raila and the president is now in one language. And if you do some analysis since the nomination of a new cabinet, people are speaking a different language. There are a good number that is speaking against the Gen Z. We might say that we are partyless, and I want to tell you, guys, we have been given a party or branded a party, Gen Zs, and with whoever is addressing anything that you are doing, we have been given a party or a name, Gen Zs, so we have been grouped in that name. Second to that, there is something that we must ask ourselves about a party. Can we form a party if even if it is not now, then in future, how can we use this? We are dealing with politicians, and if we are dealing with politicians, these are facts that we cannot run away from. How are we going to deal with them to make sure that we win? Even if we don't win now, the revolution come with time. Revolution takes time, and Rome also was not built in a day. How are we going to deal with that? Second to that, these people have now come, they are out. You can see Ruto is walking everywhere to try to encounter what we have done for the last 1 month. How are we going to overcome this? I want each and every person to go through the 48 laws of power. How do you deal with your enemies? How do you scatter them? These are things that we should put in place. Then I want to request, can we take our focus direct to the parliament, even for this cabinet that was appointed that are just about to go to the parliament? Can we put our focus to the parliament so that we weaken parliament? I remember during
Kingsman,
yes,
okay, can you
hello.
Marge?
Dr. Majus, thanks. Let me interrupt you for 1 minute. Um, Probably I didn't explain. So for the 2 minutes that we are giving per speaker, after 1 minute, I'm going to raise my hand. So please look at my profile picture or any other of the co-host. If a hand is raised, it means you have 1 more minute to go. So Dr. Majus, try to land, then we go to Kathy, then Susan, and then either Kasmuel or Dr. Miguna can chime in on that. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm up again. I was requesting that can we take our direction direct to the members of parliament, just like we did it during finance bill. I remember we were everywhere for these members of parliament to an extent that some of the Ruto allies ran away from him and he remained desperate. Can we do the same so that we weaken this government by all means? Maybe reaching the state out might be somehow difficult to us, but reaching for these members of parliament, we can use this to weaken. If you can remember about the coalition government during Raila and Kibaki, Raila
okay.
weakened
So,
the
Dr.
government.
Majus, you will now have to land. We have to really be considerate of others. So please land and then you go to
Thank you,
Kathy.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you,
No,
thank you,
just
thank you.
finalize your statement and then we go to the next.
We remember by that time, Raila used that to weaken the government of coalition, whereby he will be consulted. And that's the formula that the government of Ruto and Uhuru used when they were stealing votes from all the way from the MPs to the president. And again, that's what the Kenya Kwanza has used during this time to make sure they have numbers all the way from the MPs to the president, so that there is no way you can handle him down. There is no way you can make the president toothless. But when we weaken the parliament, the president will remain toothless, and there are people we can reach out and we weaken as strong as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, because 2 minutes are not really much, to the speakers who are going to follow, kindly try to structure your speech in a way that you're able to deliver them in 2 minutes. We really understand, but we want to also be fair to those who haven't spoken. Susan, and then Chick Afrik, and then we can have Kasmuel and Dr. chime in. Susan? Oh, Susan, are you able to
I can't
speak?
hear.
Susan Jefferson. Okay, if you're not able to, let's go to Chick Afrik. Chick Afrik, can you please unmute your mic? Okay, Susan, if you're not speaking,
hello.
we're going to drop you. Yeah, hello, kindly proceed.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Good afternoon, comrades. Mine is very brief. I just want us to make a few, observations of what's going on since President appointed his cabinet. So now he feels very energized. He feels like he's got a bit of energy around him now that he's brought other people on board. And he's going around and promising new developments and saying, oh, we're going to do this so that he can, appease the masses. I think what we should do in every constituency, in every ward, we need to also look at what has been going on since he took power. We need to look at the underdevelopment, things like schools, hospitals, roads, and all the infrastructure in our wards. We need to document these, and we need to counter all these things that he's talking about, saying that he has done this, he will do this. We need to come out clear and say the reason why we're saying you should go is because your government has failed. Look at the state of our schools. We put pictures on there. Look at the state of our hospitals. We put pictures on social media, and we share widely, even with international bodies, so that when we are talking about the failures of this government, we are also documenting what is actually happening on the ground. When he says that he's appointing these people, we need to start looking at their track record. So people like former governors, we can look at the infrastructure in the counties where they were governors and say, you're saying these people are going to, bring changes to this country. This is what was the state of affairs in the counties they led. So how then are we going to see more changes or more development in the country if these are the people you're bringing on board? And then finally, we also need to think about moving forward, because I think these X spaces are very, very good. But we also need to be conscious of the fact that the intelligence services, the police service, and all these, they're having, intelligence of plans that we're making. All the plans we have beforehand, they already have everything, and therefore they're able to plan against anything that we plan. So I don't know whether we can, have other ways of, keeping some of the things that we're planning under wraps, so that on the day we, come up with things that they were not actually aware of. Because at the moment, if we say nane nane, that's very good. But then if we put everything out there, they will be very, very prepared against any plans that we have. So I think moving forward, we need to have, other spaces where we can actually have a smaller group of people who can then refine the plans that have been made and then decimate that in other ways other than not on the space. That's all I have to say. And thank you very much for organizing these spaces. They're very, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chika Freak. Let's go to Professor Fred and then Batari and Kasmuel.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because of time, I will just go back straight to the point. I have the following point is that, first of all, we are very happy that the right diagnostic was done and that the right diseases were discovered. And these diseases are leadership, because we have a president who has no vision for the country. Governance is a problem because we have no accountability, no oversight. And lastly, people want economic liberation. So broad-based government is not the medication for that problem. So we won't care. So we have done as, let's say, Linda Jami, because I've been in this activism for some time. I'm just trying to say some of the contribution we are making, which actually answers some of the concerns. One, on Wednesday last week, we launched a petition that will be giving High Court a chance to interpret how Ruto can go to office. I know that we are doing some on the ground, Mandamano, but we want to give Ruto air, land, and sea attack. So we are attacking from all directions, but the point is the target is William Ruto. So let's not be distracted. The common enemy is William Ruto. So we have to attack him all direction, in court, everywhere. I'm sure it will overwhelm him. So the other thing is that we have a bill to amend the constitution that will also give us a legal infrastructure procedure on how Ruto can leave office without having to go to the street. That is for prosperity and also prosperity. So that will also be something we are doing. The third thing is that tomorrow I'm putting a petition in High Court to declare that protected areas in government is unconstitutional. Those things were passed by acts of parliament, but they aren't constitutional, because saying no one can go to State House, which is the key decisions that are killing Kenyans, is made. The head of state is a symbol of unity. Why should his residence be a place where you cannot go? And it actually kills the freedom of movement. So that petition is very good. If anybody is interested, you can just DM me. I'll send you the petition, but I'm going to file it tonight. Then tomorrow, I'm going to give a press statement about what it is going to do. But I find it really earth shaking, because if we ensure that the court can declare that there is no unprotected areas during Mandamano, like I'm trying to say, everyone in all my tenants in my house have rights to their privacy. But if they're smoking weed inside my residential houses, then I have a right to go and check whether they're smoking. So William Ruto is smoking weed inside there, and you have to check. So the fourth strategy, which I want us to think about, is that we have not done well because we are allowing the media to be the one feeding us with current affairs. How can the Gen Z movement start driving the media agenda? I'm sure they are hitting headline, but the conversation is still about, oh, William Ruto or Raila Odinga. I'm sure that there is a need for us to come with a media strategy to start now directing the conversation around what we are trying to do, even defining what Gen Z is all about, not them trying to define us on their own ways. And I'm trying to say that what we need to do, if I now respond to what Miguna Miguna and Kasmuel was talking about, we have to sit down and diagnose properly what is keeping Ruto in power, not his cabinet for sure, not even the PSS. So we have to diagnose and come up with those things, whether there are three or four. What is keeping Ruto in power? One of them is the money he's collecting. And we even have a petition again in court trying to talk about how some money he's signing appropriation act are constitutional, and that petition we're also going to hear it soon, is in very advanced stage. What are the options we have to dismantle the forces that are keeping Ruto in power? Strategically, I like what Tony Gachok has said, that there are a series of battles we have to win. Some we have to lose, some will remain neutral. We have to win most of the battles that are keeping Ruto in power. Then what will it take to bring him down? And somebody talks about agreeing on a 7 days of rage where we are going to go in large numbers and bring him down. And I want to say that I want to respond as a speaker who spoke. That's my last submission. According to me, as a strategist, because this is what I earn my money on, when you have a dominant strategy, even if the opponent knows, you'll beat them. And according to us, there must be some things we know that if we do them, whether they know we shall do them, we will do them anyway, because we have power and we have the ease of execution. So according to me, They have to know, but then we have to do them in a way that even if they know, they can't counteract it. Ronaldo had one style of dribbling in football, but before you realize he has dribbled you with the same style, he used to have only one style, and he works it out with speed and surprise. So speed and surprise should be a strategy that no one can always beat. So long as I have speed and surprise, you can't beat me, even if you know I'll use speed and surprise, because the speed and surprise will happen. As far as I'm concerned, no one should be giving up because this war will win it. And we need to work together as a team. And if we work together as a team with the focus we have, let us not have too many enemies of going to counties and senators because Ruto likes it when we are distracted. Let us just focus on the man and hit him hard using air, sea, and land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I have one question to you before we proceed to General and Kasmuel. Just for the sake of civic education, would you kindly list all the areas that are currently regarded as protected? Back to you.
Protected areas are 12 state houses and state lodges, which is Nairobi State House. And we wrote a letter asking the inspector general, regional commander, and then the police OCS in those stations asking them, we want to bring our petition on 30th of July. And they responded in a letter saying, we cannot do it. So we have gathered those affidavits we are taking to court to interpret whether they have the powers to stop us. The other ones is parliament. They say parliament is a protected area, so you cannot be able to go. And all those things are all unconstitutional because they were passed through acts of parliament that never really had a thinking in the constitution we have in Constitution of Kenya 2010. The other ones we have them are just they can talk about the issue of vigilance house. They are just actually named in this act. But for us, we are targeting the 12 where we have Sagana, the one in Nyeri, we have Kisumu, we have Mombasa, we have Kitale, we have Kakamega, we have Nairobi, and then I think Kisii also we have. So they are just 12, and we want just to ensure that they can be allowed at a proximal distance to issue a petition to the president. And I'm sure that's where, if they can be able to, the court can rule we have that power. And one of the orders we're asking the court to ask Inspector General to explain to us how can the citizens be able to hand over their petition to State House, because all decisions that are hurting Kenyans are made right there. Why are we wasting time on going to other places, which is not important? So they're just like that. And I'm sure that maybe I can share with Hillary, who is the host here, that petition tomorrow morning, because it has got a listed all that. Because of time, I don't want to spend everybody's time in listing. Thank you very much, co-host.
Thanks so much, Fred. Hillary, do you want to say
No, I
something?
was saying thank you so much, Prof, for coming and also for sharing that idea. And let us have that. You can share with me on my DM or my number. Then we will see how to spread it out. Thank you so much. I've seen Prof has joined the conversation. Prof Kibuta Kibuta, we really welcome you on board. Thank you much.
Thanks. So let's give Casmuel the chance to chime in. Then we go to Prof. Kibwana, and then General can also then answer questions that have been shared until now. Then we speak the next set of speakers. Casmuel, over to you.
Thank you, Madge. Uh, as we just keep on focusing on Nane Nane, because it is going to be, I think, a declaration of a collective declaration of what it is that we believe in. I think it is important for us to also um, remind ourselves of why exactly we're doing this. We're not doing this as a recreational activity. We're not doing this as an attention seeking stunt. We're not doing this because other countries are doing it. We're doing it because we feel like enough is enough. In this country, we've seen that there's a systemic rot, and it's a system that needs to be overhauled. So we are not and personally, I'm not being gentle about the fact that these systems do not work. It's not about installing people or instituting people in offices that do not work, in offices uh, order of the day is corruption, in offices which you do not have autonomy, where if you're not controlled, you cannot week. That's why I'm saying it is very important for us to, one, come to the collective conscience, but also speak to the people on ground, because currently, as we're holding the spaces, the president is also holding a campaign trail, because if you listen to whatever it is that's happening on that trail, it quite literally is just a campaign. And it's almost as if it's trying to allay the fears of the people. But we do not have a problem with an individual, because even if we had a functioning, if even if we have, we remove an individual from office and replace him with a principled man, that would still be a problem. What we're calling for with this hashtag Ruto must go is a total overhaul of the system. We are not trying to have these broad-based conversations as they would have it, thinking in political factions, thinking of, we're just saying that this does not work. It is a total rethink of how we think of democracy and how we think of this country in terms of our independence. We still have a police force and not a police service. We still have corruption being the order of the day. We still have government official trading with their family members. Those kinds of things that we have said time without number are still going on. So as we go into Nane Nane, part of what we need to remember is we are not just trying to do a thing. It's not a retaliation. This is a conceptualization of the future we want. This is a rewriting of history as we would have it. When the colonialists were here, the Mau Mau said enough is enough, and they forged their future. And the various revolutions that have happened throughout time. This is us saying, from today henceforth, this is a system that we will want to work. It is not, a lot of people are trying to make it look as though we want to ban the country. And even if you think about the comparisons that they're making, it's just comparisons to try and instill fear. You've seen a lot of people who wanted to take advantage of the movement now gain their voices. You've seen goons come on the streets, and abduct people and arrest and even beat and maim people. But you've also seen such enormous displays of confidence from various factions. I never thought that it is, you could hold on to your comrade to ensure that they're not taken into police custody, into those tracks. I didn't know that it was not mandatory for anyone to be there. It's just that they have brutalized us and beaten, they want to beat us into submission and fear so badly, so that we lose our psyche and our collective desire for a better country. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice, whatever it is that we're doing is a total rewrite of what we want to see as a country. And I'm urging you not to give up. I'm urging you not to be afraid. I'm urging you not to feel discouraged because you're seeing that it seems as though some people are winning. Nobody is winning. We are saving this government from itself. People are trying to make it look as though we are trying to humiliate anybody. We are not trying to humiliate anybody. We are trying to say that we are tired of Kenya being compared to other countries. We want to write a story that works and functions for our country. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice, do not think that for a moment we are trying to oust a person so that we install a person that we love. No, we are inviting you to a total rethinking of this system. That is what we mean by Ruto must go. It means all elements of Rutoism, that all elements of corruption, all elements of cultism. It could be on Dingaism, Kenyattaism, Uhuruism, Kibakiism, all the isms that have bedeviled this country before. Those are the things we're saying we want to reimagine. So nobody has monopoly over the answer to the question, what next? What next will depend with what you decide to do from today. As we marshal for Nane Nane, it will depend on the amount of civic education, the amount of mobilization you do, the amount of encouragement you do, the amount of correcting misinformation when you see it online from those government bots, the amount of speaking to the communities and informing them that this is exactly what we are going to do. If we leave that responsibility to only one person, that's when you try and see them try and impose a leader on you. Like I've said numberless times, I am not a leader. I'm not a leader for this movement. I am a leader in my own right, but I'm not a leader for the movement. But everyone is trying to narrow down this movement to certain individuals. But this is an awakening of the entire country's conscience. It is not limited to Gen Z. It is a Kenyan political activity that we are undertaking and saying, this is not right. It's not working for us, and we have to rethink it. So if you're here and you keep on asking yourself, so what next? There's no time, because we are at the tipping point where we have the opportunity to rewrite the Kenyan narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kasmuel. Just two questions before we proceed. Do you think the other generations, especially the older generation, understand what you need or what you communicate? Question number one. And question number two, what would you then tell them? For example, if you could tell the first, I think he's dropped. Okay, I cannot see him anymore. I think he'll come back. I'll keep the questions for him when he comes back. Professor, over to you. Professor Kibwana. Oh, Kasmuel is back. Okay, Kasmuel, you dropped. But the question is now, I've heard what you said, I've had the points that you have really communicated. So now I'm just flipping it a little bit. So I want now your perception. What's your perception about how the other, especially the older generation, perceive what you say? Yesterday or the days ago, I was taught that I had a Gen Z come on a space and say Gen Z now means generation zote. Yeah. But again, back to you. Do you feel understood? One. Two, what would be the 10 things saying now you can use? Let's say just use Marge. Marge, I expect A, B, C, least even 5. Back to you.
Thank you, Madge. I think the psyche of the people understand whatever the psyche of the movement is. It's it's just that it is out of the ordinary. When people hear change is going to come, we usually feel that change is driven by one person. We usually feel as though change is driven by one political party, and that is what has always been happening. We have always been in a situation of a false dilemma in this country, but this is a time where we're saying that yes, you people are clamoring and saying that you're making the changes, but it seems as though we are rejecting everything. And when people look at it, they say these people are ungrateful and whatnot. It's because people are forced into a false dilemma. Based on the people I have met, based on the conversations I have had with people on the ground in terms of civic education, because I believe this thing we have to do it everywhere, on the front of the protests, in the media, and more importantly, in the communities. The people are slowly starting to understand whatever it is that we are about, and and part of that, it gives me so much hope. But then if we all do not play our parts in being very vocal about this and owning this, if we allow ourselves to fall back to the traditional false dilemma that we always are, and we're like, so only one name has to rise out of a movement, we run the risk of cheapening what this thing is. Because even if you see whatever is happening currently, people are trying to shift the conversation from the issues to individuals. And I'm very happy that the people they understand this, but also the government is doing, and the establishment, if I may, is doing its best to ensure that people are still misinformed, and people still they're trying to make it look as though it's government versus opposition. And even if you see the way people present the wording, they're like it's anti-government or whatever, those kinds of things. But luckily the people are kind of seeing through the ruse. It's still work in progress that needs to be done, and it's a change that's going to come either way, because the young people who are leaderless, tribeless, fearless, understand what this cause is about, and I know that we will bring about and midwife this change. Two, on agenda, I think it is very clear that we we want a Kenya that works for all of us, and we don't need to belabor this point, that we want a police service, not a police force, that we want a functional government that's rid of corruption. But a lot of these things we will be able to establish them in a different and a new system, in a total overhaul of this system. That's why I'm not even too keen on stating demands, because I know, even if the question seems as though it leans towards what are the fixes that we can make, it feels as though we might need to make demands upon the current existing system. And we are saying that system does not work because it is laden with corrupt officials, and the corruption is rooted, it goes so deep that for us to deal with it, if we were to think about just sentencing a few people, getting a few heads rolling, we will still be in the same position in 3 years. We will still be facing these same challenges. So a lot of it is in thinking about what does a new Kenya look like. We know that in the root, at the very, very base of the root, we have a problem with corruption. We have a problem with individuals acting on behalf, individual acting as states, and auctioning our future. We have a problem with bad governance and lack of accountability. These four things explain all the problems, all the lists which we could talk about. But the only way we deal with them at the root level is by actually actualizing Nane Nane and saying we are inviting the whole country to rethink what leadership looks like, what governance looks like, what public healthcare looks like, what finance looks like, what debt looks like for this country. So I think limiting it to a few reforms would seem as though we are petitioning the existing system. We're asking our oppressor to find different ways to oppress us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kasmuel. That's really well noted, and the point has arrived home. I would like to say that I think days ago there was an interview you did and you were mistreated. I would like to state that this is a safe space and nobody's going to ask questions that are leading towards narratives that we do not know who is pushing for. This is a safe space to every speaker coming to speak. Even if you're asked a question, feel free to only answer questions that you want to answer. No. As we move on, Professor, kindly take onto the mic. There's an important question I wanted to put your way. The last few days, I've been seeing a lot of bashing going on of youths who are assumed to be, trying to make money, and then there's something like, paid activism. So, how can we also inform people that, for example, Amnesty International has employees, and all these employees are employed. As a very respectable senior citizen of the country, I believe you've also seen these things go on. What steps can we take to also educate and avoid such scenarios? Because they have been really demoralizing the young people. There's a lady who shared a photo of a fridge, what's it called, magnet, and all hell broke loose. So there are people fighting for change, but the people are jobless. But anytime they see somebody who has an idea that could bring in money, it's already just being pushed back. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Marge and Hilary, Kingsman, and the General, and even the CAS General, Professor,
I can't hear anything.
Migai.
Oh,
Yeah, Professor Kibwana is speaking. Terry, probably if you could just try to leave and come back, we can. Can you hear me, Terry?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Professor Kibwana.
Okay, let him proceed. If after 1 minute you can still not hear him, then kindly leave and come back. Back to you, Professor.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, but
Okay.
General cannot hear you. Dr. Miguna, can you? Yeah, okay. Then he's just left. He's coming back because it would be really unfortunate if he cannot hear you the whole time. Let's hope he will then hear you when he comes back. Kindly proceed.
Yes, thank you very much for all colleagues who are on this space. I think, first of all, I wanted to say, because I know there is a time constraint, but I wanted to say we must emphasize to the young people that they have really done us proud, because there is an attempt to demoralize them, to make them appear as if all their gains have been in vain. And I think there is one of the papers where I saw their work being characterized as Pyrrhic victory, a victory without victory. they actually forced the president to dissolve the cabinet of his choice. They forced him to withdraw the finance bill, even if still that is not clear what exactly is happening afterwards. But in other countries, when you withdraw a finance bill, you actually resign. They have gotten the opposition and the government to come together. Otherwise, if it was not the effort, these two groups may not have come together in the way in which clearly that they have come together. They have told Kenya that we must detribalize ourselves and be tribeless, and began to put in the mind of Kenyans that fundamental change is possible. So I think we need to emphasize that these young people have done not only Kenya but Africa proud, and they are even being kind of copied elsewhere to bring about the fundamental change that we are thinking of our country and our continent. And listening to Kasmuel, he actually summarized that they want a clean Kenya based on the constitution and servant leadership that works for all. And that's a very simple message that I heard him put on the table, plus also in their conversations and in these spaces that exist. And I think listening to Miguna saying that there's to be a sustained struggle so that the fruit that is expected is born. That is not inconsistent with Nane Nane, which is very robust. And then as it unfolds, there is work towards sustaining this struggle so that it achieves this result of fundamental change, because that's a very, very important point. If we do not uproot what has been there from colonialism and these 60 plus years, so that actually one of the things that should happen is to say, what is the Kenya that we want? And there's to be a space where that is thought through. We have all these, professors, activists, and economists, and whoever, political scientists, and everybody, so that we actually say that, like there was Vision 2030, this is the new vision. And if this vision is achieved, then there's going to be systemic change, and that becomes very, very, very important. And I think these minimum demands of the Gen Zs, when they said, drop finance bill, bring good cabinet, and all kind of stuff, they need to be concretized so that now there is something that says it is this, it is this, it is this, it is this, not because that is the main point, but to be able to juxtapose it with what the president and his guys are doing to show that even those minimum demands are being kind of subverted. But that is also quite important. And I think as we conclude, there has to be now focus main demands, like implement the constitution, not mutilate it, because already we are hearing of another BBA, another NADCO, and stuff like that. That's a very important thing, because they are trying to look at how do they get prime minister, deputy prime minister, those positions, so that they can do their coalition now and share positions ethnically. So implement the constitution, not mutilate it. No more loans without our approval. And it was said that if people don't get money, the leadership doesn't get money so that it can, pay out to this opposition and so on, then it means that their maneuvering is restricted. So I think that is something that we need to focus on, and to actually focus on the civic education, especially rural Gen Z and rural populations. Also create a mentorship for the leadership like this from MCA, all these young people now who need to get into the leadership from MCA up to the president. We have a mentorship program, and I think that this debate, that this is not just a Gen Z movement, it's it is led and started with the Gen Zs in their totality, but it is Gen Zs and progressive forces. And I really like what somebody said about Gen Z Zote. So that it is a GENZII and Zote. So that it is who began it, and it is for all generations. I really like that. And finally, I think the Gen Zs must give the other generations the authority to be part of it, so that the other generations don't keep away saying that we think we are usurping what you are doing, so that when people are coming to participate, they feel that they are supportive, they are not usurping anything, they are broadening what has been begun by the young people, and then, so that the Gen Zs, the progressives, everybody feels that those who want better for Kenya, better for our young people and everybody, are comfortable to continue. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I must have done more than 2 minutes.
No, that's all right, Professor, because you actually giving us your wisdom, so that's really perfectly welcome. Yeah, so over to you, General.
Thank you very much, Maj. And I thank Professor Kivuta Kibwana and Kasmuel, um, um, Tony, everybody else who has spoken. I think that everyone has given very, very good ideas. I like it. I want to request the co-hosts to probably push NATO and Jerotich up there, because I see them down there. They were supposed to be speakers and I don't see them up. But that is as I continue. I want to focus on some of the questions that were asked before I make a comment. Um, the question about the media and whether or not there is something that we can do about the media to make our message, or the movement's message. I say our because this movement clearly cannot belong to any generation. I say that with all due respect, because there is no movement that arises out of a vacuum. All movements arise of social conditions that exist and that have existed historically since Kenya was created or was founded. And that throughout history, Kenyans have struggled for the same social issues that the Gen Zs are currently battling with. So there is no vacuum in the struggle, and there is no vacuum in terms of how this struggle has been fought throughout history. I was talking with Kasmuel yesterday, and one of the things that we discussed was there were victims in 1963, 1964, throughout history up to today. So when we are talking about uh, justice for the victims, we cannot only just think about the victims of June 25th. We have to think holistically, historically, about all the victims, the Pio Pinto Gamas, the Tom Boyers, the Adwings Codex, the Ochukas, and more recently the Musandos, and the ones who died in 2018 when I was arrested, and the youth actually were demonstrating on the streets, and many were shot dead. Those people have not obtained justice. Or last year, when ODM was doing maandamano and many families lost loved ones. We must look at this thing holistically. But coming to the issue of the media, the mainstream media is owned by the people we are fighting against. So let us not be deceived. The Citizen media is owned by Royal Media Group, which is owned by S.K. Macharia, who was the chairman of the campaign committee of Raila Odinga. So when Raila Odinga joins Ruto in the illegitimate coalition, clearly Citizen will start siding with Raila Odinga and William Ruto. Hence, the mistreatment of Kasmuel during yesterday's show. So we have to see this in context. When you look at the nation, the editorial director of the nation was paid school fees for by Raila Odinga. He has loyalty to Raila Odinga personally. So you don't expect the Daily Nation to start covering these things in a balanced way. Look at CNN. Who is the anchor or the reporter for CNN? Has done a great job so far, Larry Madowo. But what did he do in 2018 when I was trying to talk about revolution? He shut me up. These are people whose origins and DNA are rooted in the cabal system in Kenya that we need changed. So don't expect anything different from them. In any event, the social media is currently the leading media in the entire world, accounting for more than 80% of media traffic. So once we dominate the social media and we disseminate our information in the social media, we can disregard the mainstream media. We will still encourage people who are invited to go there and deconstruct them. But don't focus on the mainstream so called media. That media is dead and dying. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the issue that I don't know whether it was Professor Chieng, but he mentioned that they are having petitions and constitutional challenges in court and blah, blah, blah. And they want to amend the constitution to ensure that Ruto can go without anybody being on the street. With all due respect, a misguided and wrong-headed strategy. Law, and I'm talking here as a veteran lawyer of 30 years standing, law is an instrument of power. Power is not an instrument of law. So law and the judiciary serves the state. You don't expect an instrument of the state to declare that a regime should go home when that regime was elected, even if that regime becomes illegitimate before 2 years like this one. So going to court is wrong-headed when you are dealing with Article 1 of the Constitution, where the people have uh, recalled the legitimacy they donated to the government in power. And they are saying they now want to exercise their sovereignty directly. Don't go to court for any interpretation of Article 1 because you will not win. No court will declare this government illegal. No court will tell Ruto to go home. If you are declaring such orders, we need to have you rebooted to the default because you're not going to get those orders. There is no court in the world that will give you those orders. So it's a waste of time. We need to focus our attention to what is important right now, which is the popular movement on the streets. Let's be very clear here, because if we are not clear, we will not be able to achieve what actually is imminent. The current state, the current is inherently and incurably defective. So you cannot reform it. And when you look for court orders and you're looking for amendments, you're trying to reform this thing. It's like taking deodorant and using it on a skunk. The order that is going to come out of there is worse than the natural skunk, the order of the natural skunk. So let's not do it. The third point I wanted to make, there is nothing wrong with people saying we are anti-government. We are. We want Ruto to go with his government and his regime. So there's nothing wrong by people saying these things are anti-government demonstrations. Let's embrace that. Yes, they are inherently anti-government. If you are saying this government is incurably corrupt and incompetent and represents a system you want replaced, then you're anti that government. Let us not run away from what we are. Let's look at it as a badge of honor. We are anti government. We want to replace it. We want it to go. How else do you say that? What we are not is that we are not calling for the military to take power. We are not calling for a faction of the regime to take power. We are saying all factions of this regime have to go home, the military has to stay in the barrack, and the civilians will sort out everything that we have to sort out. The third point, because I think a statement was made about this, I agree with the statement, but I don't think that we got it clearly what the financial and economic situation in the country is. I was telling someone yesterday that if you go to a bank and you want to take a loan or a mortgage, you want a house, they will do an analysis of what your income is and what your expenses are per month and then per year. And if the mortgage is going to take more than 40% of your income, you will not qualify for the mortgage. I mean, you will simply not qualify for the mortgage because you will have other things that you are going to take care of other than the mortgage. So, which means you will default. Here, we are told that Kenya is using 65% of revenue to pay foreign debt and mainly to pay interest. In fact, to pay exclusively interest, which means these are only interest only loans. An interest only loan is a loan where it doesn't matter how long you pay it, you will never be able to touch the principal, which means this debt is in perpetuity. It's an illegal debt because no debt should be in perpetuity. No mortgage runs more than 25 years. So anything that runs more than 25 years has to be legal. But they're telling us this is a debt anti into perpetuity. Then they're telling us if you take 65% to service the interest, what is left there? What is left there is 35%, right? This 35% is not just going into development. In fact, zero goes into development because it 30% goes to recurrent expenditure, the salaries, the benefits, the per diems, the 200 million Ruto tax for jets to Washington, their first lady's office, the second lady, the third lady, the first daughter, whatever you want to call them. So then the country gets zero towards development. I'm not even talking about what is stolen. I'm now only talking about what they are saying. Then you have to account for the 2 billion per month that Despot Uhuru said was being stolen every month from our money. Then you know this is what anarchy looks like. They were saying it is the Gen Zs and the patriotic revolutionaries on the streets that were calling for chaos and anarchy. But what do you call this? This is economic anarchy. Because if you cannot come out of the debt trap and you cannot put any money towards development, then how can this be sustainable? How can anybody say this economy will create jobs? This economy will give us universal health care. This economy will be able to provide for quality education. This economy will be able to build roads. All these things they are telling us is just being done on credit. So all this is debt. Yet, the same people are telling us, and the Auditor General has told us, and other investigative forensic experts have told us, more than 2.5 trillion was stolen in the last 10 years and is sitting in offshore accounts. And they don't want to go get that so that they can clear the debt and be able to develop our country. And this is deliberate. So when you see Raila and the rest joining in with grade D former governors, some of whom are in court for corruption, such as Oparanya, they want to support each other because without this system that is incurably defective and cannot be reformed, they cannot survive. That is why an overhaul is inevitable. An overhaul is the only thing that can be done and must be done. I like what Benji Ndolo said, that we target even 800,000. That's a lot of people. But as much as 5 million or 10 million, because everybody in Kenya is tired. It is not right to say that's all we can be able to gather, because as Ndolo correctly said, Martin Luther King gathered 1 million before Kenya got its independence. So if he was able to gather a million, there was no social media. And he was not even as organic, that organization, as this one. And the situation was dire, yes, but it was a different century altogether, almost. It was many, many decades ago. How can we fail in this day and age to be able to have even 5 million people in Nairobi when we are organized, when we can get together and hire buses and matatus, when we can loan each other money so that they can get transportation, when we can accommodate each other, when we can source for support from others who are as disgusted as we are towards this regime. We cannot fail. What I want to emphasize is that we cannot fail. And I finish where Mcoure had finished the last time. He asked the question, how do we ensure that we don't lose more lives? And the answer is simple. If we show up in large numbers, we will not lose any lives because 1,000,000 people cannot be shot at. 1,000,000 people can march into State House and Ruto will be nowhere to be seen. 1,000,000 people is a huge number. So our security is in our numbers. So basically, I'm trying to emphasize that we should do whatever we have to do to mobilize electronically using our social media handles, physically, and whatever way, so that we get these numbers and then we can remove these guys from power. Then we can be able to restructure and overhaul our state. I land there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terry. And so as we proceed, there's somebody who's joined the speaker. He is in Asia, and so the time the time zone it's late. So I will let him go on. Deborah, I see that you dropped. The Kikombe, go on. Then we proceed to a citizen of Ghana, then Jerotich. Dr. Kawasi, Neto, and Lady Justice in that order. Professor Migai, should you want to chime in at any time, just let us know. Becky Kombe, over to you. I think he might be sleeping. Becky Kombe, going once, twice. Citizen, yes. Okay, Citizen, go on, and then I check on the Kikombe if he is able to speak. But please take 2 minutes so that we can have other speakers come on board. Citizen?
You call me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Kindly proceed.
thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers, Marge and Hillary. Greetings to my brothers and sisters of Kenya. I'm a brother Pan-Africanist from Ghana. You guys are doing great. All I can do is pray for you and encourage you. I've been listening and agonizing with you since the beginning of the revolt. I have said this over and over. You are doing this with the support of all of Africa, the youth of Africa, the old people of Africa, because, like in Kenya, nothing seems to be working almost across the whole continent. But my concern right now, and a lot of people have also said the same thing, what is the end game? What will your success look like? You know, for a revolution to be leaderless, tribeless, and pervasive is a blessing. However, as gradual progress is gained, there has to be some structure to finish the job. The reasons for the disgust and the dissatisfaction are clear and the same across Africa: joblessness, corruption, overborrowing, importation, taxation without representation, political class upheaval, and impunity. Now, Professor, what's his name? Miguna has really said a lot of important things philosophically and practically. You know, since independence, colonialism was the first thing that we had to fight against, but before that was slavery. So Africans have had the wrong mindset. And if you don't have the right mindset, it becomes very, very difficult to progress. We are the largest continent in terms of land mass and also the richest in terms of mineral resources. But in terms of finances and economics, we are the poorest. So to me, something is wrong. But I want to encourage you to continue what you're doing. But at some point, as I've said, you have to try to find some structure which will calculate the objectives of the revolution and how to get the objectives implemented. Because if it continues to be amorphous, then it becomes very difficult, and you give armor to the people you're trying to remove to regroup, to strategize, and so long as they have control of the security services and the armed services, it becomes very difficult. So thank you for letting me speak. I wish you well. Godspeed. The whole of Africa is behind you. Win for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Citizen, for your contribution and also for keeping the time. Kingsman, I see you wanted to say something before Jerotich proceeds. Kingsman? Okay.
He's having some network issues. Yeah, Jerotich is here. Mkwasi is here. Thank you so much, guys, for joining. Yes, Marge. Who is next?
Jerotich, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Revolutionary Patriots. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Mine is going to be very brief because a lot of what I was thinking about and mulling over since our last session has been covered. And mine is really, once again, a rallying call and a strong encouragement. First and foremost, I want us never to forget the 60 young men and women who have been killed. You know, we have a regime that is shameless. And I always know that the public is the private is public and the personal is political. And what we see in this particular regime, publicly and politically, is a manifestation of how Ruto and his cabal behave privately and personally. This is why the tears of the mothers and the fathers will never land. Justice and restitution will have to be demanded, and it will have to be exacted. This flying, as Boniface Mwangi had said once, this flying has now been replaced with lying. And the propaganda caravans that are in full swing around the coast and different parts of the country shows me that this regime believes that it is systematically besting us. And ours is to remind ourselves that we will not be bested by this regime. Nane Nane, in my opinion, should be the second and critical turning point following the 25th of June. And many of us have already said that during this space. However, we must not leave this to Gen Z to mobilize. Gen Zote, as Professor Kibwana said, and I've seen it floating around and I've started using it in my tweets, Gen Zote must step in, all of us. And Dr. Miguna has regularly reminded us that this is not a revolution for Gen Z. It is mobilized and has been galvanized by Gen Z, but this is Gen Zote. I was actually speaking to a very fearless, incisive, and influential Gen Z the other day who was saying that they have at least 25 dependents who are relying on them for school fees and all manner of other financial requirements. And as I was listening to this person, I said, are we going to wear our Gen Z down, praising them for their valor and willingness to die for all of us? We will then be no different than this regime that is also outweighting Gen Z. Are we waiting for Kasmuel to speak himself hoarse until he's bullied off the TV screens, which he wasn't? And congratulations, Kasmuel, for standing your ground yesterday. We need, as Gen Zote, to step up and step out. We should no longer be worried about, oh, are we usurping? Are we taking over? Are we managing? No, this is all of us. This is our future. We need to mobilize fearlessly, and we need to figure out who is it that we're able to rally. I want to, for example, focus on the mothers. I'm the mother of Gen Zs. I have been on the streets with my sons, and I shudder to imagine how I would feel if something happened to them. So why should any other mother have to experience this level of pain? Let's think Freedom Corner. Let's think about what happened 34 years ago. There are lessons to be learned when mothers came out. Now, that might be my rallying point and my entry point, but we're talking about mothers, fathers, siblings, everybody, Gen Zote. We need, for example, as mothers, a mom squad, a Gen Zote mom squad, a contingent that will come out and say, enough is enough. You're not shooting another one of our children while we are all here fighting for a better Kenya. And as a prophet said earlier on, this air, land, and sea attacks, I love this. This simultaneity of action is what we need. It should be non-linear, but it should be incisive and focused on the end game. And that end game must be singular in our minds, which is Ruto must go. And as everybody has said, Ruto must go is emblematic of everything Ruto is. Uhuruism, Rutoism, that will come to an end, and we're going to demand it, but we can only now move to the next level of action if we are all together. And that is my rallying call. That is what I want to encourage us to be focused on. How are we going to make it 800,000 people, 1 million people, 2 million people? Who are we going to bring to the streets? This is not about wearing t-shirts that look the same and so on and so forth. It's about saying we are taking to the streets in numbers, in great numbers. No sloganism and sloganeering. We know that what we're saying. So please let us be encouraged. It's lovely to have these spaces because we can think and overthink, and then we get into analysis paralysis and say, are we really going to make it? And as we see the regime moving around, mocking us and trying to demoralize us, it is possible on the ground to just feel, we are tired. But let us not be tired, because this revolution is ours to win, and we will win it. Thank you so much, all of you, and viva, and let's keep doing this. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerotich, for your submission. We move to Mkawasi and then Neto. And if there's somebody speaking, although the speaker panel speaking more than 2 minutes, do not feel discriminated against. Those are our invited guests. So we're still going to add you to the panel. Do not feel discouraged. Mkawasi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mudge. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, kindly proceed.
I'm going to say something brief about the sanctity of human life, because I feel it is central to what we are doing. I mean, every time we say Ruto must go, a lot of people have already mentioned that's about a whole more than one human being. So we're not uprooting a regime, we're uprooting a system. The regime is like a branch and the system is like the tree. And we have to think that this is a system that goes way back since its independence. The first regime, when it took over from colonial authority, and that came into power through massacre, stealing, governance, taking of land. And that culture went on from one regime to the other. Human life became an inconvenience to those in power, because human life were people with a moral sense who stood up for themselves against what that system was doing. And so that is where the beginning of the indignity started. People's lands were stolen and given as gifts to British royals. I know this because I come from such a place. Imagine a community losing the land it uses to hunt and farm, land they use to feed their children and their families, to trade with each other. Land allowed our communities to prosper through very smooth local systems. And we didn't need British laws to tell us how to adjudicate our lands. But because of the power of foreign empires, entire communities became landless. And I'm mentioning this history because I want to show you the roots of the decay that now haunts us. And these are the roots we're saying we want to get rid of. Every time someone says, stop saying Ruto must go, why is it about one person? You tell them there's a whole history that goes into uprooting a system. Independence should have turned these means of achieving prosperity back to the people. But we know what happened. Our first government continued to uphold the same heartless systems from the colonial regime. Whatever was achieved in Kenya made no sense. There's just a veneer of modern development that sits on this very same system. There is absolutely no reason why we have wealthy neighborhoods on one side and sprawling slums right next to where millions live, in insufferable indignity. And I'm sorry, I don't use euphemisms like informal settlements, especially when we need to rip the band-aid off the cancer. We call out the indignity of our fellow human beings the same way that we need to call out the indignity everywhere else. And this indignity is living in conditions that are just ugly eyesores with putrid sanitation, suffocating stench, hunger. Man, you know it. You guys, you either lived here or you passed through these places. And we can't sanitize them. We can't give them this feminisms, nice names. We call it what it is. And apathy becomes a thing that people have to live through because they've just lost the strength to keep screaming out. So we must really shout. We must shout out loud this idea of uprooting a rotten system and upholding human dignity. It should never ever be a normal thing to see a human being, a person sprawling in the gutter and passing out, and then we just pass them by. And I'm saying this because this is the kind of mentality that also goes into someone was thrown away and they're forgotten. Someone was found in a mortuary and very soon we forget. The people who were found in a quarry, okay, we fight. And then at some particular point, people are hoping that we forget. Let us never get into the place of forgetting the sanctity of human life. This has to be central every time we're talking about uprooting the system. And we have to keep on connecting this decay of the system to the heartlessness of individuals who take power in Kenya. Now, why is it that protecting of human dignity is in the Constitution? Because it really is at the root of a clean democracy. It's right there. Again, I say, like I said it last time, Article 28, all people have inherent dignity and the right to have that dignity respected and protected. How come we have that in the constitutions? How come we have that? How come we don't fight for it and withhold it every single time? And I did hear Dr. Miguna talk about when we appear in millions, that protects us from being killed. Yes, numbers will protect us. But at the root of it, we have a moral right to plant and inculcate a culture of human dignity and protecting the sanctity and value of every human life in Kenya. Just to wind up, I know a lot is going on in the background. I do get a lot of information, and whatever ideas and contributions we have, we're making sure that on the ground, you guys get it to the best of our ability. We are active. My hope is for all the disparate groups in the uprising to find a common path and get ready to plant that new and clean system, because we need that clean system. You all want the same things. We want the same things. I love that Gen Zetu thing. We're all together. Gen Zote. A Gen Zetu pia sio. So let's all get it together. Let's all get that together. There is, I'll say this again because as it keeps on building up, I know individualism will creep in. There's just no room for individuals to play politics as usual, jumping from one political cartel to another. There's just no room to try to find your slice of bread and butter it. Lives will be lost, limbs will be broken. Hey, stand bold, stay strong, stay ready. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, can
Thanks,
you?
because I just dropped. For those who are asking if they're being removed from the space, that's not the case. There's a technical issue going on. I've just dropped moments ago, and Hillary added me back. So thanks so much, Dr. for your ever motivating speeches. We really appreciate your presence. We appreciate you coming on board, and we feel motivated every time you speak. Thanks again for that. Neto, over to you.
Thank you
Marge, I
very
think
much.
before Neto goes, I think you dropped Kasmuel from the speakers panel.
No, he's back.
No, he
He's back.
dropped
Oh,
and he's
okay,
back.
okay.
People are
All right.
dropping
Yeah,
and
Okay.
dropping.
back.
Yeah. And Caswell also as one of the invited speakers, should you want to chime in, don't wait for us to cue you in. Just open your mic or raise your hand. We'll see that and let you in. Yeah. Neto.
Thank you very much, Marge. Thank you, Hillary, and Dr. Miguna and Kasmuel, who are the key speakers this evening. Mine is to laud the efforts that have been done by the Gen Z over the past couple of weeks. And I really think that we are moving towards some very interesting points of convergence. And I know, listening to the speakers this evening, Jerotich, Professor Kibwana, and Benji, I think we're moving to the level where I think, the first wave of these protests, if I should call it that, was then Gen Z led, which is the real Gen Z. But now looks like the second wave of this protest is going to be a Gen Zote protest, which I think is a very good point of finding convergence. So really, I think if we made it that way, in terms of one historizing the struggles, the experiences of the yesteryears, of the 90s, 2010s coming to the fore, with the Gen Z, the real Gen Z leading, I think we're really, really going to be moving forward in a good direction. I am in support of Nane Nane, and just like every other speaker has said, the more numbers we get into Nairobi, the better it will be for us. So I really think that let's do the very best for Nane Nane, and let's make it count. But even as we do that, we must always remember that status quo is always going to fight back. And there are always people who are hanging around to feed status quo with oxygen, even when they're on the deathbed. So we must be very cautious, and we shall never be discouraged. The fact that status quo is being given oxygen, that's characteristic of all struggles. So really, it's just part of the many things that must happen. But I really think we must keep our eyes on the goal. And that leads me to my second point. When we say Ruto must go, I really think that that's the overarching broad objective. I think it's incumbent upon us and the organizers, those who sit down to draw these things. We must break down Ruto must go into its lowest common denominator. We must break down what Ruto must go looks like, and what are the practical steps or the practical pathways towards Ruto must go, so that you look I had Tony say, this is war. And if we broke down the Ruto must go war into small battlefields, small battles that we must win as we move by, it will then help us, not to get discouraged, because part of the problems that we had was the lull. Finance bill was not assented to, it was withdrawn, then there was a lull. What next? So there needs to be a continuum of activities that helps us towards Ruto must go, so that each milestone then is part of circumventing the various military objectives towards our very goal of Ruto must go. That's the second thing I wanted to say. The third thing I like to say, even though we look forward towards Sabasaba, there are moments when you can really test something. Parliament in its indignity, and this particular regime in its defiance and recalcitrance has already taken to the fore the vetting process of the various cabinet secretaries of the next couple of weeks. I really think that there's opportunity, there are three opportunities to do something there. During the approval hearings at the mini chambers of Parliament, we really, really need to accost this particular regime. There's also the chance when, in case Parliament is too hell-bent in approving these names, there's also that day, and it's going to happen in the next couple of days. And the third day, of course, is when these people move to State House to be sworn in. I really think that we must try to test our military, our military organizing in terms of those instances, even as we walk towards a Nane Nane. Nane Nane, in my view, needs to be good, big, but it needs to be part of circumventing issues around our military objective, in terms of what are we testing on Nane Nane, in terms of these big things, in terms of breaking the Ruto must go chunk and sending him home. The fourth thing that I'd like to say, which is what everyone else is conversing, which is, I think, is a good point, but I think it's a moot point, because all of us are agreeable to the fact that Kenya needs to be run on the basis of constitutionalism and rule of law. And the drafters of the Kenya Constitution 2010, I think, did an impeccable job in terms of trying to sort out Kenya's problems and try to write it all in the Constitution. So I think the pathway in terms of the Kenya that we want is really, really already in the Constitution. For example, if you looked at the current cabinet, it goes against the provisions of Article 73 and Article 75. Really, it's supposed to be a cabinet. Leadership is supposed to be based on meritocracy and, not nepotistic. It's supposed to be broad-based, face of Kenya. That is already lacking this particular cabinet. So that the issues that the Constitution spoke about is already in existence. So in terms of the Kenya that we envisage, I really think is already there. But I'd like us to also take something, which is what I think Professor Kivuta said. I have seen an attempt by the people who are supporting the status quo to try and speak in the manner of they want to an opening of the Constitution currently. I think I'd like to say it is fairly dangerous. Because with ODM joining UDA, it is good to point out that they have a supermajority, and they have a supermajority if they added with their numbers in ANC and Ford Kenya, so they can actually make a parliamentary constitutional amendment. So we must then guard against any conversation right now that is going to be talking towards constitutional amendments, because they have the numbers. So we must really then ensure that we stamp our feet in a way that they do not even attempt to go that way, even before we remove this particular regime. Lastly, I think on the 8th and moving forward, we must stretch the forces and this regime very thin. The more we stretch them, the more thin we stretch them, the easier it is for us to gain victory. We're able to do that in our numbers. We're able to do that in our organizing. That's why I'd like to appeal that let us, as much as we can, have central coordinated organizing. Those Gen Zs and everyone else who's listening to me who's in charge of this organizing, let us at least, as much as we can, close ranks in terms of coordination. We can decentralize the intervention. We can decentralize the execution. But as much as possible, let us be of the same mind in terms of the coordination towards 8th, and then decentralize the interventions, decentralize the implementation. I thank you very much, and I look forward to a day when we can have the Kenya we want, and we, the people, will be victorious and implementing the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to listening to more thoughts. God bless Kenya.